Hi, everybody. It's Bob Ost. It's Friday. It's March 28th. And This is the TRU Community Gathering. For those of you who are finding us randomly on YouTube or podcast, we're a small arts organization in New York, in Manhattan. We basically focus on helping all theater artists understand the business of theater. And we do all sorts of programs to train producers. We also have programs for writers and directors, and we just try to help everyone. Not as small as we used to be. Since we started this Zoom room, which was a response to COVID back in April 17th, 2020, much to my amazement, we started getting people from all over the country and all over the world. So we're no longer New York centric. So if you're finding us and you're not in New York, you're still welcome to come in and join us. We've been talking about things for 5 years. This is our 256th consecutive conversation that we've done since we opened this room. And we've tried to cover just about every aspect I could possibly think of what it takes to make a life in theater and be part of theater. And we also have other arts involved. We have people that are involved in film. And I've interviewed an orchestra conductor in Germany. I've interviewed an artistic director of a Polish theater company. I just whatever comes my way, if somebody seems interesting, I ask them to come on and talk with us. One of the most alluring things for everybody. Well, first of all, any writer who I've ever met has always decided that they have to get to Broadway. So we basically talk about how there are other options in your world and in your life than Broadway. But one of the options that is a little bit more attainable, my guests will tell me whether I'm right. This just seems a little bit more attainable for a lot of us is Off-Broadway. We've talked about Off-Broadway in all different manners over the past 5 years. It's a popular topic. People are always trying to figure out how do you make Off-Broadway work? How do I get my show seen in an Off-Broadway production? And there is no one answer to that. And I will start off by saying it's difficult. But I want you to meet three people. I've got Peter Breger, Eric Krebs, and Ed Gaynes here, who are all very much a part of a major part of the off-Broadway scene. Um, and we're gonna talk a little bit about what that means. What is off-Broadway now? Off-Broadway once upon a time was very different than it is right now, but we'll talk about that as well. I'm going to start bringing in my guests. Let's see. I'm going to start by bringing on Peter. Hello, Peter.
Hey, Bob.
And now we have Eric. And now here comes Ed. Okay, so hi guys, welcome. And now Peter, why are you stealing my beard look? Or am I stealing yours?
I
Yours
don't
is
know.
a
When
lot
did
more
you?
handsome, Bob.
Let's
Is
say.
it,
Oh,
what was that?
Peter's is a lot more handsome.
yeah, was very scraggly. But I just the first time I've ever seen you with a beard. So
I've had it
that's
since I ran out of cartridges during COVID. You
yeah,
know,
real yeah, I
I was
know.
I was shaving one day and I thought, why are you doing this? You're not going anywhere.
The same
So
thing happened to
now
me.
now I
Although
look like I've been on a desert island for several years.
you look terrific. It's a great look for you.
Thanks. I'm very pleased with yours too. I feel like we've joined a fraternity now.
We have indeed. Indeed we have. So P Peter Breger, first of all, is an entertainment attorney, very well respected and very well known entertainment attorney for those of you who don't know. And he also, for whatever reason, is a big supporter of Off Broadway to the point where he is the what is your title with Off-Broadway Alliance?
I'm the president for life,
The
actually.
president for life of the Off-Broadway Alliance. We're going to talk about what that is in a moment. But Eric Krebs who is my special unadvertised guest today, has been a leader in Off-Broadway for, oh my God, since I moved to New York. He's run some of the notable Off-Broadway theaters over the years, and he's been a producer on Broadway as well as Off-Broadway. So Eric, welcome back to TRU. I've interviewed you before, and always a pleasure to have you here. And then Ed Gaynes is a gen. Am I correct in saying you're a general manager as well as the operator of the? Oh, you have to unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
Ed, you're on mute.
Well, while Ed finds his mute button, let's start with Peter. Peter, tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to. Are you the founder of the Off-Broadway Alliance?
No, I'm one of the founders. It started years ago, actually, when Off-Broadway was in another crisis. You remember the Off-Broadway had been very hot, and then New World Stages was built as a response to that. And then suddenly Off-Broadway hit a downturn, and World Stages was an empty white elephant. So this was a crisis for Off-Broadway. And Beverly McKean, who was running New World for the Dodgers in those days, sort of called the community together to start what was called the Off-Broadway Brainstormers. And it met monthly for a while, came up with all sorts of schemes. And then eventually we decided to become a 501c3 nonprofit and started doing things like, well, actually, it was Eric's idea. It's great to see you here, Eric, that Eric kept saying, what about 20 at 20? What about 20 at 20? It had been an idea that had been floating around for a while to promote Off-Broadway by having $20 tickets available twice a year for 20 days. And we did it. So that's been going on since. And then we started the Off-Broadway Alliance Awards, which are now in their, I think, 12th or 13th or 14th year. And what else? A mentorship program and the Off-Broadway Economic Impact Report.
Thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah.
That's been hugely important.
And we're starting up our seminars again. We used to do those Sunday seminars, you remember, with bagels at the Theater Center, formerly the Snapple on 50th Street.
You have some of those seminars planned right now, don't you?
We have 3 coming up, one on the first Sunday in April, one on the first Sunday in May, and one on the first Sunday in June. And they start at, well, the doors open at 11 a.m. for bagels and coffee and meeting and greeting. And then there's a panel.
Do you want to just quickly give us the topics for the 3 that you've had planned?
Well, let's see. I'm sure I have them somewhere.
Okay. We'll come back to that.
I'll find them for you and we'll come back to it. But they're basically about, an introduction to producing off-Broadway. And so we have general managers and lawyers and marketers and producers and theater owners talking about how to organize it, how to finance it, what the steps are. And so people loved them the last time we did those. And by the way, we record them and the podcasts are on our website, offbroadwayalliance.com. So
okay, we'll come back to some of that.
Yeah.
Ed's got his mic on now. So Ed, say hi to everybody and let us know a little bit about your background and how your journey to finally becoming so involved with Actors Temple and also the theater at St. Luke's, which has evolved into something new.
Yes. Well, it's been a long journey. I started out as an actor, 6 Broadway shows, a number of off-Broadway shows, over 100 television shows. And I gradually segued into producing and owning theaters. And I've really enjoyed this much more than acting, to tell you the truth. So I've been presenting a lot of plays over the years. I've been operating Actors Temple Theater for 20 years. I operated St. Luke's for 15 years. And we keep going currently. I mean, right now I'm co-producing Ceremonies in Dark Old Men starring Norm Lewis at Theater at St. Clement's. So we're opening that in a couple of weeks.
So let's move to Eric Krebs, my surprise guest. I'm so happy to have you here. Um, Eric, tell us about your, well, it would be an entire show if you told us about.
As I rode my bicycle down Ninth Avenue yesterday, I was doing some numbers. This is my 60th year producing.
And we thank you for that.
Houseman Theater, Fairbanks Theater. I currently have Theater 555. Mostly I just want to produce theater, and let's talk about it.
Okay, so let's get right to it. Let me just ask you guys, would it be fair to say that it's difficult to make something financially feasible off Broadway?
Yes.
And would it be fair to say that it's a lot different now than it was 20 years ago? And can we talk about some of the differences? Whoever wants to jump in first.
In 1977, I rented the Cherry Lane Theater for $625 a week. And I presented my first show in New York, The Passion of Dracula, a 9-character period show with a set for $33,000 capitalization. It ran 2 years, the same time that Frank Langella was doing the Dracula on Broadway, and it actually paid a small profit. If I had to do that now in the same style, we'd be looking at least $1 million and a theater that would be running $10,000 to $15,000 a week. That's my answer to what's happened to Off-Broadway.
Ed, do you have a different perspective or the similar perspective?
I have the completely same perspective. The costs have gone crazy, and we've tried to adjust in Off-Broadway by using things like the periodic performance agreement, doing partial week performance schedules, 4 shows a week, and
so let me put an underline under that for people. The periodic, what's the whole name of the periodic
performance
agreement? Basically, that's something that's popped up in the past. Well, it's been at least 10 years, hasn't it? It's been a while that we've been doing this.
First one I did it in New York, and that was about 14 years ago. Yes, the first show I did under that deal was Danny and Sylvia, Danny Kaye musical, which we ended up producing for about $35,000. It ran for 3 years.
And you found that from there was another theater because it was running on the east side.
No, I found it because I had used it in California.
Okay.
I produced a show in Orange County, California, under that agreement, and it specifically said that you were not allowed to use it in New York City. But amazingly, they granted me permission, and it's a good thing for everybody because it allowed so many shows to be produced that would never have been produced otherwise.
So basically, what you're doing is you're sharing a space with sharing the theater space with other shows.
Right.
The limitations to that are that you can't have a complicated set.
It's amazing what you can do. When I was at St. Luke's, we had a pretty large stage, and we had amazing, intricate sets. We had one show had a full kitchen set with running water, a full-size refrigerator, etc.
Was that Sisters?
That was I can't remember the title of the play, but and it all went away in 15 minutes. If it's built to be done that way, it can be very effective.
So that's like one thing to keep in mind, everybody. You have to have a brilliant designer if you want to be successful off Broadway. Somebody who can minimize things and still make them look terrific.
But I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, obviously. No. That's the way you do it if you only have $150,000 or $200,000. If you have $1 million or $2 million, then you can do whatever you want. Of course, you're likely never to see that money again.
We're at a point where $150,000 and $200,000 is music to our ears. So we're not. Tell us a little bit about how you do an off-Broadway show for that little.
You have to be very careful, obviously, and you have to avoid the big fees for everybody. And it's amazing if people have interest in the project, if they really believe in it, they'll forego some of these fees. And the fees are what kill you. So we try to be smart about things like advertising budgets, and a crucial item to keep is reserve, obviously.
Um, I want to jump in a little bit to the aesthetic. I just want to say something. I just saw Celino v. Barnes the other night, and it's the one of the very few shows I've ever seen that really reminded me of what Off-Broadway used to be. Unless I'm deluding myself. It was small, scrappy. It didn't really cost a lot of money for them to produce it, and yet it was just the funniest night I've spent in a long time. Um, can we talk about when Off-Broadway used to be like the training ground for young talent, and when things used to be scrappy and affordable, and compare to what's happening today, or do we have little glimmers of that happen now? But I don't think it happens as much. Am I
I,
wrong?
I never perceived it as a training ground for new talent, and I was acting in off-Broadway shows since the 50s and 60s. And they were always the same actors who worked on Broadway. They just happened to be doing an off-Broadway play. It wasn't like it was this junior varsity. It was it was just another way of doing things.
Oh, I'm repeating. It's Celino v. Barnes. It closes Sunday, so anybody who wants to see it, you have to see it this weekend. Um, I'm just remembering Off-Broadway. I'm remembering Dames at Sea. I'm remembering what was the other scrappy little musicals that were fun, and now everything has to be like directed towards Broadway because producers think that's the only thing that's financially feasible. Would you like to comment on that statement, Peter? Whether you think I'm
I
right or
don't know.
wrong?
I mean, look, it's funny to talk. I feel like we could have had this conversation 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30, 40, 50, or 60 years ago. Eric talks about how inexpensive it was to produce way back when at the beginning. And Eric was building theaters in neighborhoods that no one was willing to go to, was terrified to go to, that are now fancy parts of real estate in the West 40s. So there have always been crazy challenges on Off-Broadway, and it also always has taken a certain kind of unreasonable personality to invest in it and go ahead and do it. But people always find a way. I mean, I loved Celino and Barnes, by the way. I saw it. It is a great example of what you can do. But a lot of that is happening in smaller theaters off-Broadway now. As recently as when I ran the Actors Playhouse in the Village, now quite some time ago, you could still produce there pretty inexpensively.
And that's the only place where I ever had an off-Broadway show at the Actors Playhouse.
Well, there you go. You were in great company. It was a venerable house for the longest time, but the
Yeah.
economics changed. The real estate economics have changed. So that made things difficult. It's funny, Ed and I were talking beforehand earlier this afternoon about how it's hard to find theaters now. So many have closed. Also, there aren't a lot of 199s, which is sort of the
Sweet
199
spot.
theater is for off-Broadway, a great place to start. Theater 555 is one of those. Ed's Actors Temple is one of those. The Actors Playhouse used to be one of those, but that's long gone. There's one at New World Stages, but there are now innovation constantly happens off-Broadway. So people figure out a way, like Ed's periodic performance innovation, or sharing theaters, or like doing small runs to establish a play and get it on its feet where everybody knows that you're not going to make the money on this, but maybe it will result in additional productions. What's the Almost Maine famously was a complete flop off-Broadway, a beautiful show, and then became the most produced show in America at in amateur theaters and colleges and all sorts of things like that. And any number of stories like that where off-Broadway, which makes no sense,
Speaking of which, nonsense. That's another
right,
good
which
story.
makes no sense, ends up finding a way. Eric, will you?
Yeah, Eric, I was going to ask you that about. Would you think
What I was
nonsense
going to
could?
say was, I recently have been involved with two different two-character plays. One of them I produced, and the two notable actors, Dan Luria and Patty McCormick, the
Mhm.
original Bad Seed little girl, got $815 a week, which is minimum equity at my 160-seat theater. Um, we ran 3 months. We actually made a little film, which we're finishing on, blah, 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 blah. The cost to get the show open was around $150,000. The set came from a developmental production that was done up in Liberty, New York. I paid $2,000 for it, hired two guys, got a truck, and brought the set in. It cost us about $5,000 total. It was just lovely. More recently, I've been involved with a show that was produced by someone who had not experienced a lot of producing. Same size show, same theater. Broadway general managers, Broadway sensitivities, and capitalized at $750,000. Oh my God. Same kind of show, same size show, totally different approach to how it got produced. There's an object lesson. I'll say no more about it at this moment.
Okay. Um, I thought of a question while I was. Oh yes, Peter. You talked about Almost Maine. I think Jane is giving us a slight hint of maybe we want to talk about what licensing is and how licensing can help the life of a show, even if it doesn't necessarily make money in its original run. Do you want to take that or no? You don't have to.
It's a great example. I mean, and in fact, depending if the show's exciting, there are all these licensing houses that are looking for product all the time. And if a show catches their interest, sometimes it can result in a serious advance, you know?
Well,
Um, even
I
without
have a question for
even
you
without an advance,
because you saw Selena V.
even
Barnes.
without, let me finish my sentence, Bob.
Okay.
Even without an advance, as Jane is saying in the chat, the almost main is just making it based on the sheer volume of licenses that it gets, and a number of shows I've been involved with who that were well received off Broadway in one way or another, but didn't make their money back, are being licensed not just in the U.S. but all over the world. There's what Rinse Repeat, which had this tiny little run at the Signature a year or two ago, just opened at this big theater in Japan. And it's easier for people to find these shows, right, with the internet now. So even without a licensing agent, I've seen examples of licensing happening. So, and people take off, we bemoan the state of off-Broadway, but around America and around the world, people are very excited by off-Broadway still. And the fact that a show has been produced off-Broadway gives it credibility that makes people interested in it.
That's good to hear.
Peter, as you remember, Cougar the musical, you remember you worked on that.
Right.
We got some incredible large advances from Scandinavia, United Kingdom, South Korea, the Philippines, everywhere. It was unbelievable. We kept the show running, even at a slight deficit, just so those people could see it, and it paid off.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a plan that people make consciously now. If you decide,
Right.
I mean, it may be cheaper to fold your whole budget into a 4 or 6 week limited run in a small theater, or even with a split week, and then you establish it and take it from there.
So this is actually part of what I said we were going to talk about, which is basically given the fact that my impression was that Off-Broadway in and of itself is really a tough play. It's really not an easy move, but it can be part of a bigger strategy. So right now what we're talking about is how Off-Broadway can be part of a strategy, of a bigger strategy. So I thank you for that. I think but I just want to point that out to the room. You got a room full, we got a big turnout, you guys. You guys are popular. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people here. A
Hey,
lot of,
Bob, I've been trying to send you the information you asked in the chat about the seminars that OBA is doing. But for some
oh,
reason
oh,
I can't.
did you send it to me in my
I
email?
tried to send it to you. It says hit Control, Enter, and send. I don't know. Maybe it won't go because there's a link in it. Is that possible?
No, no, no. It's going to be a technological mystery for now,
All right.
because otherwise I can't interview you.
Right.
Um, so let's see. People are talking about almost Maine in here. How do you get the word out on the show to get it? I know what I wanted to ask you, Peter, because you're talking about licensing. You're talking about almost Maine. You're talking about two character plays. I told my pal who produced Celino V. Barnes that he really should go after licensing for that. I think it's a perfect property for licensing. Do you think I'm wrong? Because he said that
I'm
he couldn't get any interest.
He was not getting any interest. That's
No,
interesting.
isn't that crazy?
Well, I don't know. Maybe people think it's just it'd be hard to find the actors, but I don't know. You know, Almost Maine, the thing that made Almost Maine work so well in amateur and community theater was that it had roles for everybody in every age group, and you could sort of pick and choose. I guess Celino and Barnes has two difficult roles, but I don't know that that stopped people before.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I thought the two character plays were.
they can also try it to market it themselves. You know, that's doable now. You know, if you take a look
For
at the
example, we did that with Zero Hour.
right,
We never had a licensing deal, but it played all over the country. We booked them all.
Could
right.
I ask you, Ed, how did you do that? That would be something interesting for the people in the room to know.
Well, we actually went to APAP, but honestly, that really wasn't a big help. Most of the productions we received were as a result of people seeing the show and either recommending it or representing a theater. And I mean, we played everywhere from one night to 6 weeks runs, and played all over the country. And also, Black Kings of Tuskegee, we've done the same thing, and that's been playing. It ran for 10 years at the Actors Temple Theater, just a few performances a week, but a lot of people saw it, got a lot of attention, a lot of recognition, and it's been booked all over the country, I would say, for the last 8 years.
So
Just had
but you're implying that the bookings came from people who came to see the show. Isn't there a lot of phone work involved in booking getting licensing deals for your show, or no?
there,
I mean,
there is
what's the work? What's the work that people have to do?
it depends. If you're cold calling theaters and trying to get a booking, that's a lot more work. But if you've got people calling you, that helps.
All right. Of course it does. Yes, indeed it does. Eric, what's your take on all of this? I mean, what you've watched an evolution of Off-Broadway for like how you said 60 years now. I mean, it's not Off-Broadway for you for 60 years, but it's probably a good 40 at least. I'm trying to think. 1975, you had the Theater Row Theaters.
1974, I founded the George Street Playhouse in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Prior to that, I had a coffee house theater, and I worked at the original CSC on West 3rd Street, where we did 11 o'clock late night shows of new plays. And that would have been around. And I also worked at the Cafe Chino. If you don't know what the Cafe Chino was, folks,
Shame
you
on
don't
you.
know your American history. I was the last espresso machine runner at the Cafe Chino on Cornelia Street. The birth of gay theater, which I didn't even know about at the time. I just made cappuccino. The thing I've been thinking about in terms of this discussion is not licensing and producing, it's selling tickets, because it has become impossible to find an audience that will truly buy tickets unless you have a star, because the press only looks at star-driven and Broadway-style shows. The free sites fill the audiences, which is important and wonderful, but as soon as you go on one of the free sites, the papering sites, any ticket sales falls off. And I don't think any of us truly know, I don't think, how you really sell tickets for Off-Broadway anymore.
Peter, any thoughts on that?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I'm starting to feel like a Pollyanna. There are shows.
Titanic, Titanic,
What?
Titanic. Yeah, Titanic is
I
doing well.
mean, there
So
are shows
I do want to say that Selena V. Barnes actually was successful to a degree. They made their money back, so that's certainly successful.
had a
I mean,
big hit. Yeah, I broke even.
Yeah, but I think he did a little bit better than Max. I'm going to introduce you to Max. Max should meet you. I
But
should meet all of
then
you.
you look at the Jonathan Larson project. It just opened, well capitalized, highly experienced producers, a good budget behind it. It's closing in 4 or 5 weeks total.
Back to you, Pollyanna.
I don't know. I mean, there are shows that catch on. There are shows that people are just delighted by and want
Name
to.
a few more.
What?
Name a few more without stars.
Well, there's Chelino and Bars, there's Titanic,
Those really are two
there's
prominent.
excuse me, there's Oh Mary, which was never intended to go to Broadway, and which did not have stars. I mean, it had a hook,
Right?
but it was certainly outrageous. I mean, in many ways appalling and off-putting. So in that way, it was like Off-Broadway way back in the Cafe Chino days, right?
Yes.
When the
This is-
ridiculous theater
for,
company was outrageous and so on. Yeah. I'm
for
sorry.
example, I did a play with Hal Linden a few years ago at St. Clement's,
I remember
Two
that.
Jews Talking with Hal Linden, and that sold very, very well. But of course, he only had a limited amount of time, to devote to the project. So
Well, that's true.
that's a problem as well.
Right, but that's an example with a star. But you've had the experience, Ed, of running shows that run 2 or 3 or 4 performances a week at
For years.
one of your theaters that keep going for years. And the
Like,
way you do that is that you don't try to compete 8 shows a week with
right.
Broadway, which has a weekly marketing budget that's the size of your production budget, and
Right.
and that has a different level of coverage, but there's a big audience for theater in New York, including things that that could keep a show running for quite some time. Hard to do on the old model, which is the 8 shows a week model, but that's hard for theaters as well. They get in trouble.
To talk about marketing, I just want to say, because I've heard this said before by producers, marketing an off-Broadway show hypothetically would needs to cost as much as it does to market a Broadway show, because you're basically in the same environment and you have to get people's attention. Obviously, an off-Broadway show can't afford to have a marketing budget that a Broadway show has. And Jane's also saying it's not any better on Broadway, just bigger losses. That's a given. That's a given. The reason I wanted to do this today was I wanted to talk about what some of us think and hope is an option, because a lot of us can't conceive of being able to afford to get to Broadway. I think a lot of us can conceive of possibly getting an off-Broadway production. Um, so let me see what else is in here. We're talking about different shows that were successful off-Broadway. So the thing I want to go back to, and I don't want to sound like a broken record or that I'm not listening to you guys, but my sense of it is, and it may just be that I'm just imagining it, there was an off-Broadway aesthetic. What? There was an off-Broadway aesthetic that I remember that I miss, that I don't see as much. Hello? Somebody trying to get our attention?
Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, so there was an aesthetic. There was the Dames at Sea. It was Trixie TRU. Does everybody remember the Trixie TRU Girl Detective?
Teen Detective.
Teen Detective, which did not break even. It did not do well. I never understood why it didn't do as well as Dames at Sea. But there was a whole off-Broadway that when I wanted to go to an off-Broadway show, I just had a certain idea of what it was going to be like, and it usually was scrappy and edgy, and And I'm not sure whether it's the same now. Do you disagree with me? Feel free to.
I think you're getting old, Bob. And
No, no, no. I refuse to do that.
I think it has to do with your having a gray beard. Because you sound like a gray beard when you say that kind of thing. Ah, the golden age of off-Broadway
Yeah.
when shows were scrappy and so on. Everybody who works off-Broadway is scrappy and finding a way and pulling it together and fighting the tide. And, amazing things emerge from it. And then also there's, right, the smaller theaters, which are now more and more becoming recognized, right? The Lortel decided that it was going to admit off-Broadway theaters into the mix for their awards, like the Obies have done for years. And the Off-Broadway Alliance with our awards is starting to do that a little because amazing things are happening in small theaters now.
I saw a show 2 weeks ago at the Tank in their 50-seat space
right.
called Touch with 8 actors. It was beautifully done with a set that cost about $1.49. And I actually have it written down on a piece of paper next to me that I should look into it to see where it's going. It
Yep.
was on a showcase contract in a 50-seat theater.
Yep.
Wow.
Have you seen anything at 151 Christopher where the out of the box works now? They did a thing called Kafkaesque, a musical about a modern family that suddenly starts to experience everything that has happened to Gregor Samsa and every other character in Kafka. And it was hilarious, dazzling, so smart and funny. And it's going to come back. And I think it's going to come back in a larger theater next time because, there was a response to it and it's good work.
Well, let's try to figure some of this out. Ed, you know which shows of yours have attracted. The problem, absolutely, I agree with Eric. The problem is it's very hard to attract enough ticket buyers to make any show off Broadway or Broadway break even or make money. Have you noticed anything about the shows that have sold at your theater versus the ones that haven't? Is there any takeaway that we can have?
Sometimes you can't predict. You think a show will sell and it doesn't. And sometimes you think a show will not sell and it does. It's just very unpredictable. But like we were saying earlier, I've had a lot of long run shows, and those shows, the long run shows, basically made money. It seems a little harder right now, just after the pandemic. It just seems a little more of a battle. And it does really help a lot if you have a name. But going back to the advertising discussion, I've seen producers spend $600,000 advertising a show, a good show, like Ruthless, and not moving the needle at all. No ticket sale increase at all. It's just very frustrating. So advertising is not the answer.
I mean, there's exactly an example. Ruthless, when in its original production, I believe did well. In its revival, which I thought was brilliant, I saw it at your theater. It was just fabulous.
Yeah,
and it didn't make it. And this was pre-COVID. I mean, we all know that nothing made it during shutdown, and then the transition out of shutdown has been very shaky. There are many easy to understand reasons why things were just not succeeding yet. But we're now in a place, I think, where we're told by newspaper articles that Broadway is 95% back to where it was pre-COVID. That's what the headline was. So
I think the Broadway and the off-Broadway market are different people.
Yep.
So do you think off-Broadway, when was a good thriving time for off-Broadway? Eric, when did you see off-Broadway shows making money or surviving or at least breaking even? Theater, the goal is to break even.
Probably the 80s. Driving Miss Daisy at the Houseman ran 3 years, went on to all those other productions. Was produced.
In the 90s, Eric, when people were building theaters?
Say what?
In the 90s, when people were building theaters?
Rather than tearing them down?
Yeah.
They'd still got more expensive at that point. I mean, I go back to when I was an actor in the 60s doing off-Broadway shows. did Besford Ford, starring Christopher Walken, Liza Minnelli, and myself. The whole budget was $25,000 and had a nice run. Promenade, 1969, opening in the Promenade Theater. That was a cast of 17, and it's cost $45,000. And you can't remotely do that nowadays. And these are
Okay.
full equity productions.
When Passion of Dracula opened in 1977, the equity contract was $38.50 a week.
Okay, those were great days in the past, and everything is much worse now. But
I may be wrong, but I think that was the number.
but I just want to say the
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I was wrong. 138 a week.
Okay.
138 a week.
Yeah, you're right. You know what? Now that I think of it, what are we even talking about this for? It's all pointless and hopeless. If only we had been born earlier. But listen, I just want to say that the Off-Broadway Alliance gets invited to off-Broadway shows that are interested in being considered for the awards. We received over 110 invitations to shows in this past season. So people are evidently still producing off-Broadway, and any number of those shows have been really good. And some of them have made money, and others will make money in licensing. If you go to the Playbill website for off-Broadway, sad, limping, miserable off-Broadway, sitting around complaining about its lower back pain and reminiscing about the good old days when it was a college football star. If you go to the Playbill website, there are something like 86 off-Broadway shows running at the moment in theaters. So, I don't know. I miss the old days too, when this was brown.
It was just a point of conversation, Peter. That's all.
No, but I'm sorry. I know I'm being a bit of a bore about this, but I just want to say that there are all sorts of reasons to be hopeful about off-Broadway and to be excited about.
Good. Tell us them. That's what people want to hear.
If you're unreasonable enough to think that you should continue doing. And Eric has been unreasonable for as long as I've known him.
Yeah, nothing ever has stopped Eric. My God.
Folks, I'm sorry, but I have a curtain time downtown at 7 o'clock, so I'm going to bow out here.
Quick question to you though. Nonsense. When Nonsense was playing, it as I recall, it actually didn't make money in New York, but it became a reason why it got booked all over the country. It helped Danny get his show done everywhere else. So he made $1 million, but not in New York.
No, that's not quite true. He ran 7 years at the Fairbanks. Before that, he played 2 or 3 different theaters,
including Total Mamas. Yes,
he used to truck everybody around in his station wagon to go out and play at any kind of opening or event or whatever. The nuns would get dressed up. The producer, who was also the playwright and the director and the lyricist and the chauffeur, took everybody out. That was the scruffy off-Broadway. And that's how it became a long-running hit, because he had that absolute commitment. The producer of the current show in my theater is in his first show and has hired Broadway managers to superintend it, to guide it. And it's a whole different approach to what can succeed. I believe Nonsense made money in New York. Not a lot, but it ran 7 years. One understudy for all 5 nuns.
So that's a great success story, for even though it's the good old days. But I think what Eric is suggesting is also important. Is that sometimes you gotta just make sure that you take responsibility for the success of your own show. Danny was very proactive.
As you've said 4 times, it is scruffy. It is knockabout. You do it yourself. You make it in the station wagon. You do your own company managing, your own general managing, and somehow you can make it work. If you treat it like a small Broadway show, it's going to fail.
Right.
I remember one time I was walking by Joe Corcoran's office in the Paramount building, and the door was slightly ajar. Joe Corcoran was at that time producing Late Night Catechism and also
Tony and Tina's Wedding.
Tony T's Wedding. And he's on the phone, he's talking to somebody and trying to convince them to book a group. He'll send a bus. He spent 10 minutes and I'm fascinated watching him. He gets off the phone and I say, I can't believe you're spending all this time. I mean, you have a show that's been running for 3 years. I mean, why do you need to do all this? He said, do you think Tony and Tina runs all by itself? And I learned from that. I learned a lesson from that. You got to
We'll,
keep.
So
we're
long,
gonna,
Eric. Great to see you.
bye, Eric. Thank you so much. We're
My
going to
pleasure.
continue. We're going to continue this. Um, s- okay, so now it's just us. Um, I
Oh, Bob,
wanted to.
I wanted to tell you that I did figure out how to post.
Oh, I know. I saw. I saw it.
Okay,
It's
so that
posted in there.
information is in the,
But
it's about how to produce your off-Broadway show.
which has something to do with what we're talking about today.
Yes, I was going to say I should change the title to how to produce your own off-Broadway show if you insist on being crazy enough to try. But
There you go.
but this is going to be solid practical advice, and it shows you where to register and sends you to the website with more information, offbroadwayalliance.org, and gives you the schedule. And by the way, the bagels and coffee are free.
To Owen, are there any questions that we should address from our
We
audience?
have a whole lot of questions. Let me scroll back.
Peter, just so you know, this wasn't my goal to discourage people from producing. I was just trying to look at how it's evolved, what's different now. Because if
Of
you
course, I hear you completely, Bob. And
okay,
it has evolved, but we so we make adjustments. We evolve with it.
well, one of the things that's evolved is that I keep hearing it over and over. You didn't need a star off Broadway once upon a time.
Um,
Lebanon Barnes doesn't have one.
Interesting
No.
question from Amy Stoller. She asked, is the topic of discussion for-profit theater only? I work more in non-for-profit and I feel there are some differences.
We haven't addressed that, and that's exactly something we should address. One of the things that people have said, some producers have said, is that the most viable option for doing something off Broadway is partnering with a not-for-profit these days. How do you feel about that? I know that's not your
Oh
thing, Ed.
no,
You don't do it.
it's my area. I've done a lot of those co-productions and set them up and represented the people who do it. There's also, as you know, because you've done it, right, Bob, fiscal sponsorship.
Right.
So these give you some interesting options, and there are nonprofits that will routinely make deals with commercial producers to co-produce. There are a lot of shows that have been done that way. The York does that all the time. There are others.
That also involves enhancement.
Yeah, that's right. That involves enhancement, but that's available, and nonprofits are very open to it, much more than they used to be, because nonprofits are feeling the pinch of the difficulty in raising money, not so much selling tickets, but raising money now. During COVID, a lot of the nonprofits struggled, and you saw, I mean, we were talking about the availability of theaters. The Signature used to, and MCC used to exclusively use its own space. Now they do a lot of rentals, and a lot of these nonprofits are willing to do it, and it's not as complicated as it seems to set something like that up. New York Rep also will act as a fiscal sponsor for shows that have a particular message.
Social issues.
Yeah, so the deal with social
Oh,
issues.
ceremonies and dark old men, partnering with Peccadillo Theater Company, which operates St. Clements. So it's done a lot.
Yeah.
The one negative is it's hard to get extended runs at nonprofit theaters. So it's hard to keep
Yeah,
running.
you're basically working within their season or their
Availability.
capacity. Yeah, their
Right.
availability.
Yeah, but you can leverage the fact that they are a nonprofit, and that you can take contributions as opposed to investments to make shows really impressive. I mean, at Theater St. Clements, right? They
Yeah.
they can do beautiful beautiful work there. And then you establish it there in a limited run and then take it from there. I think,
That's how we started Zero Hour. We started at St. Clements
right.
in 2009.
Also,
And
some shows are starting in cabaret. Don't Tell Mamas has been a place where some people have tried starting their shows. So you got to start somewhere. Cabaret is often an affordable option. Although I have somebody in this room who
People
knows
are
that she thought,
using alternative spaces, right? And there are shows that are going into what, the cutting room, for example. And then I've forgotten the other. Oh, even the Triad, right?
Ruthless started at the Triad.
That's right. And the Triad, the advantage of a cabaret space is that it's the liquor sales that make the money. And so the rent for the theater is can be substantially less. And lots of shows have started at the Triad and then moved. So, that's another possibility.
Owen, did we answer? What was the question?
It was just asking about the non-for-profit space.
Oh, right. Okay, that's why we moved to not-for-profit. Right.
A lot of people want to know more suggestions or tips for producing and licensing and getting the word out on individual shows.
Well, producing and licensing are two different things. They want to know both.
Yes.
But you got to produce the show first before you can even think about licensing.
Yeah, first comes the producing.
Well, you know what? Come to, if you're not if you're interested and you want some bagels and coffee on a Sunday afternoon, take a look in the chat on the information about the Sunday seminars that are starting up. They're designed to deal with all these sort of basic questions about how to get started, and there's an outline of what each of them will be that's in the chat.
And we also have our foundations class, which is starting Tuesday night, being taught by Dave Elliott. So if anybody, we're still taking applications for that because he had to postpone for so long. So we're just starting on April 1st, and we really are. It's not an April Fool's joke. We're starting on April 1st. So what other
Yeah, I want to ask a
questions?
question from Paul Smith. We are honored to hear from three theater giants, but we're not here to, or he's not here to hear about the past. What are some practical ideas for the future of off-Broadway production as an entertainment business?
Pardon me, Paul, have you been listening? Yes, that's exactly what we've been talking about.
Yeah, do you want to recap anything specific for him?
Well, I don't know. First of all, come to the seminars at the Off-Broadway Alliance and you'll get a practical, hands-on, nuts and bolts, specific discussion of how to start from producing a workshop or reading and then hiring your general manager and creating a budget and raising the money and then finding the right venue and deciding how many performances a week to do and hiring your creative team and then branding and messaging. So you'll have that. The other thing as a practical matter is talk about a fiscal sponsorship, if that's a possibility, or a connection with a nonprofit, or don't do a traditional 8-performance week, or go to a smaller theater. All of these are ways to adapt to the current environment, and people are doing it. And as I say, there are at least 110 shows that have been submitting themselves to the Off-Broadway Alliance Awards this past season. So
yes, Peter, I have listened carefully, and everything I've heard has suggested ways of getting a production, but not as making money as a business. And in the entertainment business, that's what you do. That's what could be done.
Well, Paul, I'm afraid I disagree with you.
All right.
And
I am one of the few people who believe.
We've been talking.
I'm one of the few people who believe
we've been talking.
That the current tyrant in the White House has opened ways to make money.
I'm muted. Sorry, Paul. It's not about fighting with the panel.
It's like the way P.T. Barnum might produce a play if he were around now.
Yeah. Well,
right.
As I said, there are things that are done constantly that in the way of finding alternative venues or alternative schedules, or the thing that kept Cellino and Barnes running, or the thing that Ed uses to keep his shows running for a year and then go on to licensing. These are all about, we've been talking mostly about the for-profit model and how to make it work. What you can't do, or usually what you can't do, but it's true on Broadway too, is try to do an 8-performance week in an unlimited run and hope that you can recoup $2.5 million if you're doing an off-Broadway musical. That is hard, but there are ways, as we've discussed, to make this practical and make money with it. And there are people who are working in it and doing it every time. So I urge you to come to the seminars and you'll get hands-on, forward-looking answers to the questions that you have.
Jane Jordan has her hand up.
What we have been discussing is exactly that. Is exactly the alternative to the idea that you have to do the 8-show week, $1.5 million budget. So there are a lot of options, but you need to be guided by someone who knows their way.
Jane.
Yeah, I wanted to just reiterate something that Eric said earlier when he was comparing the 2 shows that he's done recently. Having just finished an off-Broadway run, the one piece of advice that I could offer is to work with people who are used to working off-Broadway. There's a very different cost structure. There are very different resources that are sometimes better, sometimes lesser than. But when we were putting our team together, we got cost estimates from general managers who are used to working on Broadway versus people who are used to working off Broadway. And there was such a huge difference. It's just like, it's inconceivable, the big difference. And part of the difference is the costs of the vendors that are brought on board to serve the shows, some of whom are used to working on Broadway and some who are used to working off Broadway. And and that's just providing the same service, so that's one way to help you keep your costs down. And because if your costs are too high on a weekly basis, you just can't run.
I'd like to say this to everybody, and I don't know if you'll disagree with me, but in general, consider what your total budget is when you are approached by people who are giving you estimates of what it's going to cost. Things within your budget need to be proportionate. Okay, who's talking now? Okay, all right. I can't find out where this is coming from. All right. So anyway, if your budget for a show is $100,000 and your general manager wants to get $50,000, something's off. So everybody just be aware of the fact that there are ways of getting things at different price points, and a lot of it does based on somebody's compassionate understanding of what you can spend in order to do your show. That's all. I guess I get so frustrated when people come to me and tell me that they're spending more for their general manager than they are for, I don't know, their set. So anyway, anybody else? Owen?
Not that I've really seen, no. Anyone else in the room have a question? Raise your hand.
Yeah, let me just jump in real quick and ask my usual question about streaming. Do you do much streaming, any streaming on off-Broadway productions, or that's just a completely different world?
It's a different expense. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, a lot of people tried it during the pandemic, and nobody that I know figured out a way to make it work. There are, of course, streaming services, the National Theatre in England, and then what is the live stream service that has a lot of Broadway musicals on it? I've forgotten the name of it.
Broadway HD.
Right, Broadway HD. But I
there's also streaming musicals.
I'm sorry, what?
There's also streaming musicals, which doesn't have the well-known product, but it has lesser-known product.
I mean, it's nice to be able to see things that you just weren't around for. But I mean, part of the reason that we do what we do is to be in the room, right, with other live human beings. And that's, I don't know, that's my focus. I think that's,
Okay. I'm just curious why it doesn't and it hasn't really worked. It's the economics sound like they're too hard.
well, I think it's just I mean, people do live capture,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you end up being able to distribute your live capture, and that's a good thing to have. But then you're competing with all sorts of television and streaming and all sorts of other things, and you're not offering the specific thing, or this is just my view, but you're not offering the specific thing that Broadway and Off-Broadway has. One of the things about Off-Broadway is not only are you in the room where it's happening, you're right there. You're 10 or you can be in the last row and you're in row G. I mean, so it's an intimate experience, which is a different thing from.
There are also union problems if you're an equity show.
Say that again, what?
There are
Union.
also union problems if it's an equity show.
Well, it's a separate contract if you're
Yeah,
going to stream it.
cost. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So it's like you have to raise two budgets, Don. You have to raise a budget for your show, and then you have to raise a budget for your live streaming. They're very, very different.
You know what? Somebody asked in the chat whether the Off-Broadway Alliance Sunday seminars are streamed. They're not streamed, and they're not video recorded, but we do audio recording of them. And the Sunday seminars are up on the website. Hey, Lee. The Sunday seminars are up on the website, and you can hear recordings of past Sunday seminars, and the ones that we're doing in April, May, and June will also be up in audio recording form on the website if you can't make it on those Sundays.
That's the podcast audience. That's a big audience. People just like to listen while they're doing their laundry.
Uh-huh.
Bob, if you don't mind me jump. Bob,
Yeah,
if you don't mind me jump.
Let me introduce you to Z-Man. Z-Man's in the room. He's somebody we've known for years, but he's created something called the Urban News Network, and I think he wants to tell you a little bit about that and see if it's anything that any of us could benefit from.
Yeah, actually, Urban News Network is the umbrella company of Theater Live Online. Peter, I was the one who asked about the streaming of your seminars. My thought was for me to come in and record your seminars and put them on Theater Live Online. And Don Hall does the same thing. I would love to get with you and talk about how we could do streaming. The main thing for us is, me as a Black producer, it's hard for us to get our stuff on stage or otherwise. But if we find a small room to record stuff like that, we could put them on Theater Live Online and be seen nationwide on Roku, Amazon, Fire Stick, Android, the whole 9 yards. So that's where I see streaming could be a real advantage for the underlings who can't get on stage somehow in some ways. But we could find a theater and actually produce these type projects and put it on a streaming platform who can't afford to get on stage. So that's another way that we can make that round. So Peter, again, I would love to.
You sent me something to put in the newsletter, right? About
yes.
Yeah, okay.
And
we're ready to go now. We can put that.
I am ready to go. I sent you another email, by the way, to introduce you to our project. But like I say, my main thing was to actually go and record your seminar and put it on Theater Live Online as an education series for Theater Live Online. So that's an option that we could go to as well.
All right. Well, we can talk about that. Yeah.
If you're already in touch with Peter, then you could probably email him about it. If you don't have his email address, you can email me and I can forward it to him.
No, we're in touch.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay, so,
nice to hear you.
So I think we're gonna wind up now. I just want you guys to know that a lot of people here like to stay afterwards, and if you can stay a little later and meet them, that would be great. If you can't, it's okay. We open up breakout rooms, and I can put Peter in one, I can put Ed in another. If you don't have the time, that's fine. You just let me know. So I'm going to unspotlight you guys, and I'm just going to say a few words to my YouTube audience out there. Hello, YouTube audience out there. Thanks for being with us today, and thanks for finding us. I guess I didn't really tell you who we are much, but we're Theater Resources Unlimited. Again, we're a small not-for-profit organization in the New York area who manages right now to be offering support and educational opportunities to people not only in New York but all around the country. And we even have people coming in from Malaysia, Germany, UK, Australia, everywhere. If you like what you heard today and if you find it interesting, and you want to be part of conversations like this, and you want to ask questions and be in the room, then I can, I can make that happen. All you have to do is email me. Email me at trunltd@aol.com. That's trunltd@aol.com. And I'd be more than happy to invite you every week to come to our various sessions. We have a couple of interesting things coming up. I mean, next Friday we have Lisa Gold, who is very much involved in the actors universe, but she's going to be talking about attracting positive things in your life, including representation. So it's going to be a kind of a spiritual and practical our conversation with Lisa. The following week, I'm doing something that I think is pretty interesting. It's called The Other Side of the Table: What Casting Looks Like to the People Who Do the Casting. And I've got Tony nominee director choreographer Dennis Jones coming. I've got Tony nominated producer Cody Lassen coming. Tamara Pika, who was one of our tech advisors and also a casting director and a producer, and casting director Robin Karras. So join us for that, and we have things coming up. April 18th is going to be our 5th anniversary of TRU Community Gathering. So we're going to do a special hour community gathering on April 18th. I hope you'll join us for that. The week after that, I've got Mark Russell coming. Under the Radar Festival used to be with Public Theater. The day after the Public Theater let Mark know that they were no longer going to be able to do his program, he came on this show and we talked about it. And at that point, he didn't have any idea what was going to happen. But Under the Radar is back, and he's going to tell us about how that happened. And then into May, I've got Bob Cuccioli is going to be coming. I may have Alex Newell coming. I met her the other night, and she said she'd love to do this, and I have to get in touch with her. So hopefully I'll keep it interesting week after week. I'll do my best. If you want to support us, we started this as a community gathering, a community service because of shutdown. Obviously, we're not in a shutdown anymore, and hypothetically, I could go out and do live things again, and I do some, but I don't want to give up the virtual. I love doing this. If you want to support what we do, we charge various amounts that you can choose when you come in and visit us in the room here, or you can give us a donation, or you can become a member. Becoming a member would be great. We'd love to have you as members. You can go to trudonate.com, trudonate.com, if you want to support us. That's it. I hope to see you in the weeks to come, and thanks for being with us, and thanks to my panelists, Eric Krebs, who's not here anymore, Peter Breger, and Ed Gaynes, who are still with us right now. So thank you, and thanks to the community. It was a great turnout, guys. I appreciate having you all here today. It was like 42 of you. That was good. It's really good. Let's keep
Thanks
that
so
going.
much, Bob. Thanks for having us, and it's great to see you.